Hello and welcome to The Print. My name is Soumya Pillai. Just hours ago, we got a tragic news of an Air India flight which was bound for London, crashed at Ahmedabad airport just minutes after it took off. The aircraft was carrying 242 passengers. To discuss the security protocols and what might have gone wrong, because the investigations are still ongoing. We don't exactly have the reasons what might have caused the crash. We have a safety expert, Mark Martin, with us. He's the founder and CEO of Consulting. He's also a very tall voice in civil aviation, safety, and technology. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Martin. I'm going to jump right into the questions. We already have a few images and videos coming from all angles of the crash. I know it is too early to speculate because we don't have the authorities that have given us a possible reason. But your first thoughts, what could have gone wrong in this crash?
Hi, Soumya. A pleasure to be with the print. Thank you so much for having me. And I wish we had this interview on a more fun and a happier topic, but it's extremely sad. Today's a dark day in aviation, not just in India, but for the whole world. This is the world's first 7879 Dreamliner crash and possibly the worst air disaster in 30 years. And probably the last time we ever saw a disaster like this was, September 11 when an aircraft was used as a terror weapon. So again, it's pretty much this event has sent a rippling message across the world on. We as aviation experts, we never like to speculate. We believe it's best that the investigation comes out. We believe it's very important that this investigation, in the case of at least the 787, is a global investigation, which also brings on board the FAA, NTSB, EASA, DCA Malaysia, CA Thailand, and every civil aviation regulator out there, including the DGCA, because it's in our interest, in the interest of safety, in the interest of world travel, that such incidents are never repeated. But guess what? We have to see one today. And what is more unfortunate is for the last 20 years we've always criticized Air India for being a government-run airline. Oh, it's a government-run airline and sarkari. But guess what? For the last 5 years, Air India is in private hands. It's in the hands of Singapore Airlines and the Tatas. So to see an incident like this, an event like this, with Singapore Airlines in management control and helm of face is absolutely shocking. And I hope that the government, stops its appeasement directives. I think this is the best time where the government should be sharpening its knives, cracking the whip, and holding all those accountable, whether they're Singapore Airlines, whether they're Tatas, whether they're Air India, whoever they are, so that we don't see 260 people perish in something as tragic as this. Okay. Now, I know you asked me about what happened in the, asked me what we know so far. I think what we know so far, at least if you look at the flight radar and the ADSB paint, is he got airborne. He had an initial rate of climb. He climbed to about 500 feet, but around 500 feet, 500 to 600 feet, AI 171 could not continue flight. Now, usually what happens in that situation is when you don't have power assurance, when the engines don't give you the thrust you need. Okay, it could be several factors, not one, but it could be thousands of reasons. It could be anything from bird strike. It could be your FADEC failing. It could be one engine failing. It could be fuel contamination. It could be hundreds of possibilities. This is where we should not speculate. But what we know is that the crew called ATC. He said, Ahmedabad, Air India 171, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Okay, and Ahmedabad kept on calling him back. Air India 171, confirm intention, confirm intention. We copy on Mayday. Air India 171, how do you read? How do you read? No response. Because you just had 10 seconds from where you are. And from the video we've seen, it appears that this aircraft entered into a clear uncontrolled stall because obviously there's no power to continue flight. There's no thrust to give you aerodynamic control to climb, and that led to this aircraft nose up, slamming the aircraft on the ground. Because obviously, um, clearly, both the pilots have done everything from what we know, at least from the video. It appears they've tried to do everything possible to continue flight, but that's not really happened. And what makes it worse, Soumya, is also the way the buildings are cluttered in Ahmedabad. We don't have a clear flight path where you can at least okay, level off at 200 feet, put your nose down, gain some speed, gain some speed, then start climbing gradually and come back and land back at the airport safely. But here, the minute you get airborne from Ahmedabad, you're inundated with these buildings across you. You know, and as my dad was a pilot, my granddad was a pilot. I've been a pilot. I've done some flying. I've been, I now work as a safety investigator and an AS 9100 aerospace auditor. It's very easy for people like us to nitpick and speculate, but I want to refrain from that and I just want to stick to factuals. Uh, with the way that with that Air India 171 pitched up, my initial reaction was, hey, why don't you just put the nose down? You would have got some more speed. But again, that statement that I just made can go against me because I'm assuming he had his engines available. Okay, I'm assuming he had power available. But if there was no power, then it's extremely sad and tragic that both the crew and those on board virtually and actually saw the aircraft collide. And I think that's the worst thing that we could possibly see. Um, you know, um, what caused it? In aviation, we have something called shell. It's when you investigate any incident somewhere, you investigate it and you try and bring it down to a couple of parameters. It's either software, hardware, equipment, software, hardware, environment, live wire, live wire to live wire. So when you say software, it could be regulations, systems, documentation, procedures, SOPs, checklist, whatever. Hardware is the aircraft and the technology and the equipment and the engines. Um, SHE, environment, the weather at that time, was it cloudy, was it hot, was it humid? Live wire is pilot actions, and live wire to live wire is two pilots or two people, whether it's the control tower or the aircraft. Okay, so from what we know, if I use shell, the environment looked fine. you know, the procedures were fine. The pilot had 10,000 hours of experience, super trained. He was instructor and examiner. He took off. He did everything right to get the aircraft airborne. Then comes the hardware and the live wire to live wire. So it's possibly something to do with hardware or live wire to live wire or live wire. And again, Soumya, I want to request everybody. I've been speaking to the media today. We must respect the dead. The pilot is no more. His family is mourning the loss of a dear one. Those on board have perished. Those on ground have perished. And I think some level of responsibility should be expressed by anybody who gets called on to be on the telly. Um, you won't believe it, and I know you're a very mature journalist because you were in ET and you were in HT and you've seen so much of a work, reporting environment and news gathering. Um, it's so crazy that you see some people, some so-called experts, be so frivolous by jumping to conclusions and pointing fingers, and I think we need to stop. We need that investigation to be unbiased. We don't want any investigator to be coming with preconceived notions or come with we need them to be absolutely open when they investigate this case because 260 plus those on ground who have perished. It's not only tragic, it's disastrous, it's catastrophic, and everything that emerges from this, we should ensure that it never reoccurs again.
Mr. Martin, my next question to you is that you're also a trained pilot. If you could run our viewers into, because the flight was barely in air for less than a minute from the footage that we are seeing. What goes into a pilot accepting the plane for takeoff? What are the safety checks that go into play? Because for a plane to just be in air for a few seconds before it crashed, I mean, if you could run us through the safety protocols that is followed before takeoff, and also what goes into calling the mayday call, like you said, that which is the highest form of like a safety warning. So if you could just run our viewers through that process of.
Sure. Usually, when you take an aircraft, the pilot needs to do a walk around of the aircraft. After the walk around, engineering needs to state to them whether the aircraft is in good airworthy condition. You're allowed something called MEL, a minimum equipment list, and, which is called deferred defects. Sometimes you don't have certain things which don't work in the aircraft, but you can still continue a safe flight. The crew's made aware of it. When you start, you follow a checklist. You start your engines, you monitor your margins so the engines don't overtemp. After the engines don't overtemp, you taxi out, you line up for takeoff, you open your part, you max your engine thrust. When you max your engine thrust, you have various speeds. You have you have a speed which is one when the A speed gets alive. That means the aircraft is fast enough so that the A speed indicators take the data from the air and tell you the speed. Then you have you cross your 18 knots, which is a safety limit speed. Then you come to something called V1, which is that V1 or VR. That is at that stage. That's when if you have an engine failure, you should have enough time to stop your aircraft and come to a stop at the end of the runway. And when you hit a speed called V2, that's when you take off. That's when V1 VR is when you rotate. That's when the aircraft rotates up for flight. Clearly, what we know from what we've seen is aircraft entered VR, went to V2, which is your climb speed. Somewhere at V2, either he lost thrust, either he didn't get the relevant part that he wanted, for whatever reason, and that reason has to be investigated. And subsequent to that, when you have no thrust, you have no power, you're falling like a rock. And that is something as pilots we dread to see that day. Not every time do we have a situation like Sully Sullenberger with US Airways in New York landing on the Hudson. Okay, at least Sully was lucky. He was about 3,500 to 4,000 feet, and he could turn and make that landing on the Hudson. What do you do when you're 600 feet above ground? Nothing. You just bring the aircraft down and you pray like hell that you're alive. And I think this is exactly what happened.
So this particular incident, unfortunately, also has sort of opened up the discussion about the larger civil aviation safety ecosystem in India. If you could speak a little about that, uh, are we at par with the global standards of civil aviation safety, or is there something that we need to fix so that
Oh yeah,
such
yeah.
incidents don't happen?
India operates the youngest aircraft fleet in the world. Okay, we have an Indigo with 300 aircraft. Indigo is the world's largest airline, low cost airline ever. Okay, till date. We have SpiceJet, we have an Air India. So we operate aircraft. Our DGCA does not allow you to import an aircraft more than 15 years. Okay, so we have laws and rules which forbid an old aircraft to be flown in India. So when we're already flying the newest technology, and mind you, the DGCA is vengeful. It's they're vile. They're vicious. Okay, and they're very aggressive when it comes to safety oversight, and throwing the book on you and throwing fines on you. But let's come to Air India here. For the last 5 years, Air India has been repeatedly, every 6 months, fined by the DGCA for some violation or the other. Whether it's a training violation, whether it's a cabin violation, whether it's a crew violation, a maintenance violation. I mean, it's just been endless. How come we never saw these violations happen when Air India was under government control? How come we didn't see a catastrophic incident like this when Air India was under government control? There's several factors which I hope the investigators bring up, because it's having been in several airlines in my career, and I can tell you, when you're in a private airline, when what we call lala economics in this country, when you have to spend money on maintenance of an aircraft, you think 10 times. It's going to defer control. Let's delay this. Let's hold this back. Let's do it later. But when Air India was in the government control, they never cared. They just signed that check and bought that part. They got the maintenance. They got it done. So I think the problem here, this is where things have gotten to a point where um, it was a disaster waiting to happen for Air India, and I was hoping it would be something a bit more passive, but certainly not this. And I think we're pretty good in safety standards. All our regulations are European Aviation Safety Agency. Every regulation in this country, from EASA, from the 145 AMO maintenance system structures, is European Aviation Safety. Continuing airworthiness, CAM is European Aviation Safety. We are now IQ Annex Revision 3. We should be going to Revision 4 very soon. We have FDM monitoring. We have SMS. We have 9859. So we have the systems, and we are probably at par with Europe. But um, eventually, it's the airline. And how much can the DGCA be, playing police? Even the DGCA has limitations. At some point, the DGCA trusts the operator and say, okay, fine, you're managing an operation, so we trust you. But after this crash, I think even the DGCA is thinking twice.
So there are also some, infrastructural problems. And in your first question, while you were answering the first question, you did mention about the fact that traditionally we had seen that airports were supposed to be away from the city where they did have some functional space. Now we are expanding our urban spaces, and our buildings and our residential complexes are just eating into the airport space, like right till the boundary line. Do you also feel that this is a problem that needs to be addressed on the on the larger, while we are talking about civil aviation safety, civil aviation infrastructure also needs to be put in place at some place?
Superbly pointed out, and kudos, ma'am. I think you've hit the nail on the head. The crash survivability would have been much higher if the aircraft took off in an area that was not dense. Every single airport in the world today, there's a very good reason why you drive 50, 60 kilometers away from the city and take a flight. Okay, it's away from the city. Second, worst comes to worst, you can bring the aircraft down, land on a field, and you can increase your chances of survival. But urbanization in India, we have to also be mindful that we're a population of 1.45 billion people, and we're not doing anything closely remote to reduce our population numbers, and we don't even care. Okay, and that level of urbanization has led to uh, cities and townships and offices coming up around airports, which is not a good thing. It's not safe. Yeah, and imagine if this disaster happened in Delhi, where you took off and landed somewhere over Vasant Kunj or Vasant Vihar or Dwarka. Or imagine Mumbai, where you came and landed straight in Powai or something, or landed directly into Navi Mumbai, or took off and crashed over in Santa Cruz. I mean, you would have killed a lot of people. Okay, so I think all of this needs to be brought up in a holistic investigation with strong action points. Okay, Ahmedabad Airport is unsafe. I've been saying this for the last 25 years. When I was in SpiceJet, I remember we had loads of our aircraft used to have a bird strike because Ahmedabad around the airport is pretty dirty. The people throw garbage everywhere, and that attracts birds and vultures and kites and all sorts of you know um, pretty heavy 7 to 10 kg birds. We've seen bird strikes. We've seen our nose rudder on the aircraft blown off. We've seen windshield blown off. We've seen engines blown off. This has been going on for the last 25 years, but guess what? No one has done anything about it. And I agree with you. Airports need to be away from the city, in somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and strict, urban development rules should be brought into play, where you can't do any development that's only for agricultural land. I mean, you go to any airport in the world, you go to Vienna, you go to Frankfurt, you get over to Berlin, go to Paris, Charles de Gaulle, you go to Amsterdam, Schiphol, you go to Bucharest, you go to any airport in Europe. They're far away from the city, far away from urbanization for this very same reason. Okay, So it's absolutely shocking. It's, as you rightly said, it's several elements. I'm really glad you brought it up, because when we do shell investigation, when we look at environment, the SHE part, this comes under the environment, the urbanization part. And this is something which really can't be ignored anymore. And it's high time that somebody took some steps and some actions on this.
Mr. Martin, my last question to you is that we are all waiting for that investigation to know exactly what went wrong. In an ideal investigation, what are the points that will be covered? What kind of if you could just tell us a little bit about the process that's
Oh,
going
okay,
to
so
be
this
happening.
investigation is going to be a global affair. It's not going to be isolated or firewalled only with the DTC or the AIB. There's going to be FAA and TSB. Everybody that's going to be around will get involved in this, and uh, and I'm sure there would be no hiding, because the FAA will want to know, EASA will want to know, every civil aviation regulator will want to know why. Okay, and there will be a list of usual suspects, but there'll be factors that made it worse. Factors that made it worse was urbanization, as you rightly pointed out. Well done, excellent, excellent observation. But there will also be other bits as to why did he lose power, what caused him to, take off and not have the thrust assurance that he wanted, or not have the thrust that he required to climb out. What led to that? Everything is goes back. The five whys. Why did that happen? Why? And you eventually come to the truth. And I think this time, I hope this is an unbiased, neutral, independent, and uninfluenced investigation. And I'm sure, because all the more since this happened in Gujarat, the Prime Minister would personally be involved to find out why, because that's his state and that's where he comes from. So let's hope everything works out in the right manner and the right phase, so that we know the reality of what occurred.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martin, for sharing your insights with us, and thank you to our viewers for joining this interview. We are extensively covering this accident, and we hope that you're going to tune into the print for our very live updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Soumya. It's wonderful to be with the print and you.